and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Mr. Joey Knish. Joey, thanks for coming on. Before we get into this episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter, @bettingpod, and check out the website, businessofbetting.com. Guest suggestions are much appreciated. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Betfair Proprietary Limited. Betfair operates a betting exchange and is licensed in the Northern Territory of Australia. Residents of Australia can join Betfair by visiting betfair.com.au and support this podcast by using promo code BOBPOD. Please gamble responsibly. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Mr. Joey Knish. Joey, thanks for coming on.
Jake, how are you, mate? I'm glad to be on here, man.
So, when you're not on Rounders and doing some other stuff, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, man. So I'll give you the background. I mean, I started out probably at 11 years old. My dad was a fucking degenerate. So it started, it kind of came in all in the family blood, getting started at a young age. And the Knish name really came from, you saw Rounders the first time, and I was like, man, this guy is everything that I've ever wanted to behold in a gambler. He had the grind, and it was doing it the way that I envisioned. And so, started up the Twitter account, I think it was 2013, and just posting plays, man, just going out there and trying to, make a name for myself, make some connections. College football was really the original thing that I kind of cut my teeth in, and then started getting into more, last few years, really upped it with the props and a lot of the offerings that have been out there, and just gone from there and been able to grow the following, grow the connections, then have some success doing it.
So if you could go back to the very beginning and put your real name on that Twitter account, would you do it? Or are you very, very happy you have a very excellent name, as it turns out?
No, honestly, I mean, people in real life have started calling me Knish, so it's worked out all right. Some of the other aspects is how do I say this? There's a benefit when you keep a lot of accounts at different sports books of semi-anonymity. So, a lot of people know, that I'm connected with and stuff, know who I am in real life, but, I keep accounts at basically every different offshore book. A lot of different bookmakers follow me. So there's a benefit of not basically being able to tie, if I'm posting plays or posting props, to not be able to tie that back to my actual account. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is I have a normal job. I work. So to ensure that, it kind of stays separate from that piece of real life is kind of where the Knish aspect of it really helped, and kind of stays in it to this day.
So you mentioned normal job, you mentioned the grind. Tell me what the grind means to you. How does that apply to your betting, and I guess in conjunction with having a regular day job?
Oh, so I mean, I've got the fortune of, normal day job's an analyst, so I got a desk job, but it allows me to, I keep an iPad at work that's got Don Best on it right next to me. And this will sound crazy, but I'm on my phone hours and hours a day, refreshing different sites, going book to book. So, if you looked at my screen time, when I get the weekly report, it's usually between 10 to 12 hours a day, kind of shopping, going book to book. And I would say it's not for everybody. I always get a few jokes on Twitter here and there of like, dude, you have a regular job? Like, are you serious? And I had the benefit, I don't have kids at the moment. And this is my fucking hobby, man. Like, it's not a real, I don't look at it as, like a work or any of that. It's like a love. It's a passion. It's like what I want to do. This is everything that really, it's how I want to spend my free time. So I don't look at it as, a labor or work or an effort. It's just more of a love. I don't know. So if you to spend this much time on it and be able to have some success, it really builds up just to become like a part of your life. It's a part of it's just my daily everything of what I do. If I'm not at work, all my free time, goes to this. So
Interesting. What is it about it? Is it the sweat of watching a game with something writing on it? Is it the process of it all and spending all the time on the Don Best screen or on the internet finding different angles and edges and grinding out, a side profit? Or what actually is it, do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean the sweats are great. There is nothing that fucking gets me up in the morning better than. So I'll give you a little. I bet a lot of openers. That's where I know some of the senior guys will give you shit for that or say that they don't like it. But a lot of my edge comes from being able to get the fresh number. So there is nothing that gets me fucking jacked more than being able to say that I had the best line or I got the fresh number. Like I'll give you an example on a college football. So most of my Sunday isn't spent watching NFL. It's usually I have it on in the background, but I'm prepping for college football, from Sunday morning all the way till when the openers hit Sunday evening. And there is nothing like to have. And like if they've got a game and it's 11 and a half and that 11 and a half was out there for 10 fucking seconds and I got a piece of that 11 and a half. And then the rest of the week, it's 10, it's 9, it's down to 7 to be one of the only people out there that have that 11 and a half. That's kind of what gets me going, man. And that's how as a gambler, when you're not going to be one of, and I even get this into a longer thing. You've had people on, brilliant people with, Ivy League backgrounds, Rufus Peabody, Rob Pizzola, Ed Fang, advanced statistical mathematical backgrounds. That is not I work a regular job. I went to public school and community college. Like I have to grind. I have to go that extra mile to be able to get that edge that I'm going to grind out. And just to be able to compete and make money. So and I'm not betting, 5K, 10K a game because you can't get that on openers. So when I'm trying to grind out some money each month or do this on a regular basis and have success, that's the kind of stuff that you got to do.
How do you make sure it's clear you have a distinct passion for it, whether it's different components from the gambling to the thinking about sports and sports betting and markets and the Don Best screen and openers and all that sort of stuff? How do you ensure that the passion doesn't overflow and turn into things like overbetting or things like going on tilt or anything like that?
Yeah, no, and that's and you know what? When I first started, without a clue what the fuck I was doing, that played into a factor. And I don't even mind saying, there's a piece of me that could I stop doing this if I really wanted to? I don't even mind saying. Part of it's an addiction, but to be able to. It takes a while to learn how to do it right and how you're going to go about, the money management and the bankroll management. I've always been fiscally conservative by nature, so that helps, learning how to budget from a younger age, and just making sure you're not over betting or you're not going crazy. I don't know. Maybe it's I got older and some of the tilts or the sweats that you have during game days and stuff that kind of fades away. And I still have the fire in me, but it's different than the where if you lost a game and then you're like, the whole I got to get it back or any of that fades away with experience and just being in the game and learning how to do it right. Over time, obviously it's stuff that hits you when you first start out, but it's not going to be there once you learn how to do it the right way.
So take us back to year 1 or year 2 of your betting when you were just starting out and tell us what it was like back then. What world were you living in? A lot of people and a lot of past guests are in all different places all around the world with different experiences. But what was your initial 12 to 24 months like in betting?
Oh, I would say I was on the, I don't want to call it the early adopter, the forefront of offshore gambling. But that's kind of where it started. I've had a sportsbook AG account that, it helps in the long run now that once you have some success that I've had this account. But I remember I was probably just basically in high school, 18, 19, and started out and placing some bets, making all the typical mistakes. Didn't have a great background in exactly how I'm going to shape a number, how I'm going to, make a power rating or that kind of stuff. And so that was all stuff that you had to pick up along the way. You learn, the money management of it, of betting proper increments and building a bankroll. And that was the toughest part is when you don't have any cap. I mean, I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. Starting your bankroll with fucking nothing, man, is a grind. To get to the point now where, I'm able to keep a lot of accounts at a ton of different books and have enough money to be effective at all these places. It took a long time. It takes a long time when you don't start out with any capital to be able to grow it, to have the capital to put at risk, to keep 15 different accounts funded and be able to be there, when a line drops or a prop drops, be able to hit it. And it took years. It took years to get to that point, to now have enough outs and have enough capital to be effective at that level.
What points along the way were the best, learning points or parts where you picked up certain things? Was it early on and stumbling? And I'm guessing if we could have a graph of our life P&L in gambling, it would be very interesting to look at, to see the ups and downs and some of the dips and some of the peaks. What do you think the areas for you were where you collected the most knowledge and wisdom?
So when I was on Twitter and I was doing the solo thing, for a year or two. And I'll tell you what changed my life is I got, I'm in a network, or what we will call a group now. A lot of different names for it. Picked up, and man, the connections. It's people talk about gambling Twitter, and there's a lot of jokes about it being a sewer. The connections that I have built from Twitter, just to open my eyes to all the different areas and all the different ways in the learning experience, and having the group knowledge. There's too much information, too much data, too much capping, too many sports to be able to go at this alone. And that was where, when I first got in, I was like, man, fuck this. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna do it myself. I had never really worked, in any type of group setting or any of that. You want to do it. You learn very quickly that it's just hard, man. If you want to do it year round, you want to do multiple sports, you want to keep an eye on a bunch of different books, it's too much for one person, especially if you have a job. So that's what, if you're just starting out, or, you've got some buddies that are into it or stuff, the best thing you can do is find like-minded people, or sharp people, or people that have the same passions you do, and work together, or work in a group, or find the right connections to be able to do this, because that changed my life and has changed my profitability, my experience, some of the stuff that the guys taught me, they opened my eyes to a different way to do things. And just having connections. I mean, I used to be, have a couple of accounts. Now I've got 20 accounts, and I'm able to make bets not only offshore, but some connections in Vegas, some connections in Jersey. Like the more connections you have, connections is money. And that's something that I didn't really have a grasp on when I first got into the game, that it mattered that much, that it is not something to tackle. If you want to do it seriously, you want to do it at a real level. It's not a solo gig. You got to be working with people.
The extent and I guess the way you've used your connections and networks, has that changed over the years? Were you tailing people who are amazing at Masters Week, so I guess golf, and weren't afraid to say, this is probably plus EV, so I'm happy to bet it, versus now where you might be more information sharing and knowledge sharing across different sports or different systems and approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first got on Twitter, it is a learning experience of who's legit. Most people aren't. Who's got good information. Who would you trust tailing?
Yep.
And I made mistakes. You think people are, there's a lot of people out there trying to scam, trying to sell picks, trying to say that they're legit. There is a cesspool element to it. So it's going to take some learning experience to know, but you have to eventually get to a point where you've either got the right connections to tail people. You can't be capping every sport, and I've got to the point where there's a few sports I bet where I don't do any handicapping. It's basically all tail, guys I know that will feed information. It's not possible to do it at a high a high level, and be doing, 3, 4, 5 sports at once. I remember Reed and Rob Pizzola had this conversation about somebody who we knew who was sharp and was struggling in one aspect. And part of our conversation was you can't do it right if you're doing too many sports at one time. You're going to miss things. There's too much information. If you're just plopping stuff into a model and not giving it any type of attention, I will never believe that's the plus EV way to bet. There's too much information out there, injury updates, change in lineups, that type of stuff that you're going to miss if you're overloaded. So you have to get to that point where you've got people you trust, either people you follow or people you're working with, that you're basically able to just take their word, take their action, and run with it.
So let's isolate college football. And in terms of, like you mentioned, there's a lot of content, information out there, and there's a lot of college football games for the fans out there. How do you go about attacking college football generally, and do you have to hone in and find a conference or a handful of conferences that you typically will bet?
Oh no, I go full FBS and FCS, and it is insanely time consuming. But part of my process every week is you look at. So I do a ton of front end prep work. I would say that's, if we want to say what's your edge or what's your do. I mean, I start prep work. Last year I even started earlier. This year I'm about to start up here in a week or two. Is you kind of immerse yourself in, and you put the legwork you're going to put in on the front end. It will pay off at the beginning of the season. I will tell you that is where the most edge you're going to find is if you put in that work in the spring and the summer. It's going to pay off that first month, but because before the data is really there, you've got to get that front end work, before you're able to look at any of the modeling systems or any of the analytics in the first 3 weeks isn't going to be real refined. So you're putting in that work in the summer, in the spring, to be able to have that edge that's going to be there. So my process starts up, early, a few months beforehand, most cases, and then kind of gets into a weekly routine of looking at box scores Sunday morning, updating the power ratings, looking at a lot of player stats, because I'm big into the college football props, and basically, then doing a deep dive from there, even to the middle of the week, when a lot of stuff gets updated, to where even though most of my plays are going to be Sunday, Monday, that doesn't mean that, there's not spots I'm looking to pick off later in the week, depending on which way the market shifts. So, but again, if I'm giving a piece of advice, it's you've got to put in. I know a lot of people, you may not have the time, or you may not want to immerse yourself that deep, or depending on what you got going on. But for me, it starts early, and it starts in depth. And I don't like limiting myself to, a conference or a team or that. For me, it's the full boat. But it's a lot of time investment.
Interesting. Do you mind sharing some of the things you might do in the off season? Are you creating, the Joey Knish version of a Phil Steele manual that's applicable for sports betting this coming season? Or take us through, if you don't mind, a couple of things that you might spend your time, or a vast majority of your time, on.
So I mean, a couple of number one, Bill Connolly. He's like the godfather of college football, these days. I would say Phil Steele's kind of got that OG reputation, but Connolly's got the goods as far as, what's in terms of he's starting. I mean, he's already 35 previews in, and here we are in early April. So a lot of those, I'll read every single one of those previews, usually a couple of times over. I'll get, I begrudgingly will, get Steele because he's still got a couple of things that help benefit. And then a lot of it is hard work with going to the beat writers for each team, watching each spring game. And as I had a couple of guys I work with that, do the same type of deal. So we're exchanging information. I do a complete revamp, updating my ratings from the end of last year, and do all the tweaks as far as, returning production, and that, the type of basically data you've got coming back from last year, and then being able to pick out and identify some areas for improvement that might not be obvious to a data system where you'll get a returning production percentage number, but depending on the recruiting or any of that, or how guys looking in some spring reports, you can pick off things where you might not it might not reflect in what would be a bookmaker's version of the early rating numbers. BOL's already dropped some game of the year, so you can start to get a feel for the early market for what numbers are going to open at and be able to pick off some easy openers coming out. So that's all. The earlier you start the prep and you put that work in, it will pay off for you on the front end of the season.
It sounds like you yourself are your own database and your own engine and machine that can consume all this data and information and then hopefully utilize it on the game day or the Sunday before game day to try and get the best lines. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that it's a fair assessment. I mean, I've got I keep a large Excel file with ratings and past data and that type of stuff that does some auto update, but a lot of the work that I'm going to put in is just manual. That's where it's hard work and it's a grind. And some people, I know some guys will swear by, they just want to put data in the model and whatever it spits out, that's what they're going with. That is not the way that I believe the best way to handicap. And it should be an element of your handicapping, but there is still edge to be had if you're putting in that type of work. The market isn't that, I might say in an NFL market or in English Premier League that it's past the point of efficiency and liquidity where any of that stuff's going to give you a main advantage. There's still small markets out there that you can put the work in and gain plenty of advantage.
It's very interesting, and I want to jump to the NFL draft in a minute, which is probably a good segue from college football to the NFL draft. But before I do, I just have a different question for you around the Don Best screen or any type of multiple screen scenario where you're looking at screens for certain things to pick up. And if you grabbed a random person on the street and put them in your situation, they would have no idea what they're looking at, most likely. Take us through what you might be looking for, if you know how to explain it, because maybe it's just some sort of intuition and sense, or are there sequences of things that flash and change and move, or are there trends that you're trying to pick up? Tell us about what that experience is like and what you're computing inside of your own head.
Well, number one, I would put it a borderline obsession with trying to get the best numbers. And so part of that is you're going to be if I told you how many times I refreshed my phone when I know an opener on a date that I know an opener's coming or a normal time frame of when they're coming, it is borderline psychotic. So there's an element of just being there and being ready and refreshing and being prepared for it. So that would be my number one. When you're talking about a screen advantage, it's seeing when it pops. That's the number one advantage that I get from screen viewing is seeing when the first number is going to jump. So that's one. The other part of it is, if I've got, there's two elements of it. One, if there's a target number that I'm looking for on a certain team that I'm going to set, and you can set it depending on what software you're using, and that you can set alerts. It depends if you're looking for a certain number, a certain section or segment of what you're looking for. So there's that. The other element of it is if you see a number getting away, if I've been on the fence of a game I don't mind grabbing a screen chase. If this number is sitting on a 7 and I've been is it going to tick up to 7.5? If I see that 7 going away, I'm going to go grab it. So that's where another element of just having a lot of time and investment in it to be able to grab those numbers.
That's interesting, because do you feel like you get it right 55 or 60 or 70% of the time when something is trickling or moving quickly and you have to grab it? Does it often go back to 7 when you might have grabbed 7, it was 6.5 back to 6, and then it finds its way all the way back up to 7? Or do you think it's over time? And it sounds like you might be one of the world leaders in spending time looking at Don Best or other similar screens. Do you think it's something?
That's really what I've been striving for. Is that not the world leader again, but to be the guy that stares at the screen more than anyone else.
Do you think you can? Do you think you can conquer the screen, for want of a better term?
Yeah. So what I would say, I mean, a large percentage of my action, will come at open, which I don't want to say it's a. Yeah, am I going to get the best number at open the vast majority of the time? Yeah, but that's not a real. I don't want to say that's not real, but that's not play the market at a more advanced level. Some of it is knowing people. So I know a few people that move the market themselves. So some of that is informationally that if you know a move's coming or who's making it, that helps too. But yeah, listen. I'm not going to tell you I get the best of it every single time. But I mean, if people have been following me for a long time, I would feel confident in saying it's more often than not.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the skill is finding the resistance point. And if we looked at the Super Bowl this year, with the Patriots and Rams, the resistance point was 2.5, and most people said it's not going to get to 3. If it does, it'll be knocked off immediately. So that's easy enough for the Super Bowl for most people. But when you get into the other markets, that's where I guess the network helps to, if 3 people say once it hits 7, I'm going to take it, and it's sitting on 7 for a few hours, it's not going to go to 7.5, I would imagine.
No doubt. And I can't stress it. You got to have outs. You have to have, this is when I was first starting out, you can't do this game and have 1 or 2 books. You just can't anymore. That is, if I could stress one point, it's, I have tried to expand my horizons to as many outs as possible. Offshore, domestic. I don't mind going to, the scummier books, having as many accounts as possible to take advantage. Because if there's one book that's going to pop to 7 for a second, and everybody else is trading 6.5, and you want that 7, you got to have it. You got to be able to get it. And that's part of it. And I know we've talked with other people in the past about cryptocurrency and being able to move money. Playing the prop game too is, and I know we'll get into it here in a minute, but you never know what props each book's going to post. So you can't be set up at 1 or 2 books just thinking or, twiddling your fingers hoping that they're going to post the props you're looking for. You got to go out there and get it. So, I mean, that's where I will keep as many accounts and have at least, a reasonable, at least enough to hit it a few times at each out that I have.
So let's talk about the NFL draft. Do you have any golden rules that you swear by that might have worked for you over a number of years?
Oh, first of all, I love the NFL draft like a young son. I mean, it was, some of the money that I've been able to make in past years off the draft has just been, but we're hitting a point now, and it's, you reach it with every small market. It starts out inefficient. There's that time where you can bang it and you can fucking rake money off of that thing, and it is so open in there. And we've just, I'll tell you what it is. We've passed that apex of, ripe for the taking with NFL draft. And you see it now, and sites have gotten wiser. They're using the upper echelon mock drafts to set lines. They're being more conservative. I'll give you a couple examples. BetOnline put out some draft props earlier today. So what they do now is the same shit they do with openers. They put it a $50 max. So guys who come in, and I hit a bunch today, and you know what they're doing, will hit it for $50, shape the number, and then they'll up the limits once the number's already shaped. Same shit they do with, any ATS over under that with, the major sports. Even Sportsbook AG, I played some draft props there. They are taking Daniel Jeremiah, who's one of the, the leading mock draft guys. They took his mock draft, his last version, and set the over-under for players at his exact points.
Wow.
So those, the days where books would set, no fucking clue what they're doing, throw out some shit, that's probably, it doesn't mean, an offshore here or there is going to set some dumb lines. That happens every year. But instead of it being, the entire market clueless or every book clueless, it's probably just a handful. But as far as golden rules, I would say the one goal, this is what I've seen so many people fall into, is you have to completely take out what you feel and think about a player. And so many people struggle with that of like, oh, I think this guy sucks. There's no way he's going to go. Like, you've got to throw that shit out. Throw that to the side. Because I mean, a lot of NFL teams and NFL decision makers make absolutely atrocious decisions, dumb decisions. I mean, Rashad Penny going first round in the draft last year before a couple of others cost me a shitload of money. And I can't, it's one of those things I would have never envisioned or thought myself that Penny would go to the Seahawks first round. But so that's one of those where you've got to take as much personal feeling out of it and really use the information you're seeing. Go to the beat writers, go to the quality mock drafts, listen to as many local team podcasts as you can. It's really about information acquiring rather than it is, any type of personal opinion.
Yeah, it seems to suit someone like yourself who's willing to spend the time and the hours having access to that information. And I remember, I think it was D'Angelo Russell in the NBA draft. He was not supposed to go to the Lakers that early. I think he was a pick or two later in almost every mock. And then there were some late rumors out of some beat writers that made it pretty clear that he was a very, very high chance of going to the Lakers. And then the pricing was still way off. He was, 2-3 to 1 in some instances to go. I think it was second overall. Or even, in recent years, being a number of, even Baker, when he was supposed to be the second or third quarterback picked, and then Josina Anderson said, it's either this guy or I think she might have said one other quarterback, and then she said, no, they're going Baker unless there's a last-minute change. So is that the type of stuff that you've got to be on top of and have the outs and then act quickly? Is that the general sort of process?
No, absolutely. That's the game nowadays, is, the days of just a bunch of horrible numbers being posted and you've been able to clean it up are probably done. Now it's about who's going to be first to market. When the information drops, you've got to be ready and you've got to act on it and you've got to have the account and just be ready to go. I mean, stuff, if, a couple of, any of the major guys tweets out something, man, that number is going to be fucking gone. That is gone in 5, 10, never more than 30 minutes nowadays. Especially if it's going to be something, a significant news break or a news drop. And if you missed it, you gotta just roll with that. I mean, it happens so quickly nowadays because it's become such a, an element and a focus and kind of basically a part of gambling culture more than, 4 or 5 years ago, draft props were like a little side thing that nobody really paid. And now it's blown up so much, and last year I thought it hit the apex. But at the same level, I think a lot of books got hurt last year. Like, everybody's trying to be that team that's going to offer a ton of draft offerings. And I know some places got their absolute ass kicked. So, and when that happens, books are going to make changes. So, and I think you've seen it this year is where, I mean, we're 2 weeks out and there's not that much out. There's some stuff out there. There's not that much out there. And a lot of it's been decent, so to speak. So it's not going to be, I mean, I'll tell you, it'll probably be the least profitable draft I've had since I started doing it.
Interesting. Yeah. And it does seem pretty settled. If you look at Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks and McShay and Kuiper and a few others, you kind of get a general consensus. It feels like, other than maybe Daniel Jones and potentially whether or not the Giants will wait for Haskins or go early or go with the earlier pick, there's not a lot of, I guess, disagreement. Even with the tight ends, I saw the betting markets earlier, and I know Hawkinson's a pretty big favorite, but Noah Fant did pretty well at the combine, and no one really knows necessarily whether he'll jump up in the last couple of weeks or if he'll be a late first, early second. So there's not too much that seems contentious to me.
No, absolutely. And you're not getting, you're not going to score a big nut either. It's pretty well capped as far as, first running back to get, first tight end taken, those type of things. Even if it's not the chalk guy, you're not getting any type of nice price on any of the realistic options who it could be. So they've kind of taken the scouting and the mocks and actually been able to set, decent numbers at a lot of places. So, and it's, it is what it is. That's just the life cycle of something that's going to be small market. It's never going to be able to crush it for years on end.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. Tell me about how cryptocurrency has changed your overall betting.
Oh, I couldn't do what I do on a daily basis without what it's provided in the last 24 months for me to be able to. It is just, I remember the first fucking withdrawal I got from Sportsbook AG. It took 2 months. It was a check for $1,000 from a Canadian quote unquote real estate company. I brought it to the bank. It said it was like a Canadian company, but the check said on it U.S. funds. I got two people at the bank looking at me like, what the fuck is this? So, I mean, from the time I requested that to the time it actually cashed and cleared in my bank was probably the better part of 10 weeks. So you're talking about, half of a season if I wanted to move that money from Sportsbook to one of the other books out there. Nowadays, crypto, if you're keeping a lot of outs, it is the fucking lifeblood of being able to move money around. If you want to, especially if you're in the thing, if you're just scalping, arbitrage, playing middles, that type of deal, especially for large weight, and if you're putting a lot of risk down, you've got to be able to move it. And that is where, I wouldn't say I was on the earliest adopter of, the I wasn't in at $100 at BTC. But obviously it helped the bankroll, being into it a little bit on the front edge. But the ease of movement and then the withdrawals within 24 to 48 hours, that has completely changed the game to where, I just said there's no excuse. If you're like a 1 book or a 2 book guy, you shouldn't be. Wake the fuck up, learn how to use Coinbase and start moving money around and get other accounts. That's where the days of keeping like an out really should be, if you're trying to do this on a real level, that's got to be gone. I mean, there's really no excuse other than just a lack of understanding. And I mean, it took me, when I was first learning about Bitcoin, I sat down every day after work for an hour not just an hour, and read like, what the fuck is this? How do I learn how to use it? How do I learn to move it around? Where can I keep it? It was just immersed yourself in it, to where most people should be at that point these days. But if you're not, you got to get there. That's where there is just too much opportunity in having a lot of accounts that crypto affords you, where using, and I still see a bunch of people say like, a check or a MoneyGram, or I'm still, I want it tied to my bank. Man, you got to leave that shit out. That's where crypto, it changed the game for me. And it's kind of it changed the game as far as basically your options and your flexibility.
What impact do you think it had on the books? Were they more willing to take on more risk?
I mean, I think definitely you would see, Whale Capper talks about this a lot, about basically since they were such on the cutting edge of Bitcoin that I'm sure they received, an absolute, crush of financial backing being on the kind of the early wave. But it's taken out a lot of the inherent risk. The riskiest thing is if you're an offshore book is basically processing deposits and withdrawals. And you see, back before cryptocurrency, all of them had, the big ones, Dimes, Bovada, Sportsbook, had issues at some point with the federal government. And most of it was tied to moving money around in some fashion like that. So it's taken out a lot of the risk on their end and the fees on their end. And I remember getting a MoneyGram from like Nicaragua once. And so the length that they're having to go through to get you your money before cryptocurrency and process payments was just insane. And it was risky and it pissed the government off. And now you don't have to use, any of those establishments to do that anymore. And that's why, a lot of places have gone BTC exclusive. And it's just changed the offshore world. It's made it, instead of a place that was maybe not an area where, 5-6 years ago, I would have said you should have a lot of money offshore and feel comfortable doing that, to where now I'd say it is. I have more money, tied up in offshore sports books than, I do in my savings account. So it's just, it is what it is. That's just, it's just the game now.
No, it's fascinating. What else is there that, what challenges or burdens are there for you in this world? Is there something else? Obviously, money movement might have been one previously, but it seems to have somewhat been solved. Are there other things that stand out to you that you'd love to fix if it was possible?
You play this game for a long time and you start to have some success, accounts and limiting, and especially if you're going to play it a certain way, if I like to use a lot of props, and use some of the square books and take advantage of my bookie, a Bovada, and that type of stuff. Being able to keep your accounts and keep your limits, and not get, gotten the boot from Five Dimes, not just once. So and that's the challenge. Is really, if you're going to have success and you're going to play at a lot of different places, and you're going to play some of the smaller market stuff, play some props, and win over the long term. Books, they're going to eventually, at a lot of shops, you're going to have some issues. And that's where, I would love it if everybody was like Bookmaker and never booted anybody and never limited anybody, and just, if you're sharp, they move the line on you when you hit it. That would be the dream scenario. That's never going to fucking happen. So you've got to play the game a few different ways. And it's a pain. It's somewhat, if it's a pain in the ass. Part of it, like I told you on the front end, is why, you don't keep your name in it, and stuff. So yeah, do I wish books were more lenient on players, or especially some of the recreational books were apt to take a little bit more risk? Or I don't mind reasonable limit. That is proper risk management. I don't expect that Bovada is going to let me bet $1,000 on a fucking prop and beat the shit out of them for years. That's not going to happen. But I know Five Dimes, ever since the Tony situation, Five Dimes is super conservative right now. I've had people follow me on Twitter know I've had plenty of issues with my bookie taking features away or slow lagging bets. Bovada's got a long history. They've been, I think, better in recent years, but they've got a long history of not catering in any sense to advantage players. And so if you want to use those and that's what it's not. I'm not going to be, if you cut your teeth playing, the most liquid markets for 10K a game at Pinnacle, yeah, that shit doesn't matter to you. Where if you're, Rufus, you come on, that he's not living that grind and that life. So that it's not going to be an issue for him. Whereas if you're trying to make it, on this level and use the recreational books and bet stuff that's going to have the most advantage, is going to catch up to you. And usually it's sooner rather than later, and there's tactics and ways that you have to implement, but so that's probably the hardest. There's some days, or if I lose an account, where it's just like, oh fuck, like, do I really want to go through this shit? But yeah, that's just, I don't know, it's part of the game, man. It's something that you've just got to be able to work around.
So in terms of self-evaluation, if we look ahead in 7 years, let's say, and we have the similar conversation to now, what things do you think you would have implemented, or you would have tried to implement, to try and make your life easier? Or do you think you'll always be in it for the grind and you're happy to put in the time and the hours because it's worth it on the back end?
That's a good question. I'm part of, I don't know, maybe one day, I have kids or something and I got to slow down. But, to this point, it's become such a part of life that I don't know, short term, I don't see it changing, especially with legalization coming to this country, and the more outs that's bringing, I'll tell you, it's not the time to fucking slow down right now. I'm too excited. I'm in the Detroit area. So in what I would expect to be the coming months, Michigan's gonna open up and be one of the next states that drops, and that's going to open up a whole new world for me. And man, I'm just fucking ready to go. So I've gotten to a point now, even from a few years ago, where I automate a little bit more stuff. So that helps, but this is always going to be me, man. This is just my style. It's always going to be the way I have to go about it. I don't mind fucking grinding out. People give me shit. Hey, $25, $50 prop, $100 prop. I'll take it. That's just what I do. So, and that's not for everybody, but hey, it's what works for me, and it's just the way I'm going to go about it.
No, that's awesome. And one final question on the legalization aspect for you. You obviously have a skill set that would be appealing to many different people in the future sports betting industry, I would imagine. Do you ever see yourself jumping the other side of the counter or being involved in different parts of the industry as opposed to as a sports bettor?
It's funny. Somebody somebody I know pretty well that does it from that side asked me that not too long ago. Yeah, maybe one day. I've always thought it'd be interesting and just to be able to work at a book and that type of stuff. I mean, the problem you run into is I've gotten into I'm in the 30 now, and got a career and that kind of stuff. So it's like, would you consider flipping and changing your entire life and trying to do that? Maybe, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. I think it would be interesting, and I'm someone who I could spend 12 hours a day at the risk room in a sports book, no doubt, and fucking love it, and do that and not have any issue. But part of it, I don't know, man. Some of it's competition, man. I love fucking winning money. I just love taking money from a book, man. You see some of the books out there, especially the ones with bookmakers that'll talk shit. I fucking love getting after them and working with guys, and some of it sometimes is, I don't even know if it's the money. Sometimes it's just fucking winning and getting and being able to say that you had this line, or I cleared this month, and that's why I like posting on Twitter, being able to throw some stuff out there for people. So that's good, man. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll see, but for right now, we'll just see how it rolls.
No, that's awesome. You can feel the passion coming through. I certainly wish you all the very best. Football season will be here around the corner with college football and the draft and all that type of stuff. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, Joey, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Hey, brother, I loved it. Appreciate you having me on.